Well, lovely to meet you, Michael. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for the invite.
The podcast is called Destination Education UK, so we're focused on anything and everything to do with education in the UK, and we would love to speak about your role as the head of the school. But before we get to that, is it okay if I ask you a little bit about your own education and your own background?
Of course, yeah, fine.
So tell me, where were you educated and what was it like? I read that you went to Ripon Grammar, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken.
Yes, I was brought up in Wales, South Wales, and then my parents moved to Yorkshire, where I began in Ripon Grammar School. My parents and my sister then emigrated to America when I was in the sixth form, and my visits to California and America allowed me to look at scholarships in UCLA for athletics because I was a bit of an athlete at that time, and I had the imagination of my career being in athletics and not having to work at all, basically. Very, very kind of young thoughts. It didn't happen because UCLA suggested I got an English degree in sport and then to go back over to do a master's. Well, the only degree in sport in 1973 was to be a sports teacher. So I ended up going to teacher college in Exeter, St. Luke's College, to become a sports teacher and get a degree in sport. So from then, it's a very quick story of being a PE teacher in a school in Devon, then understanding I did not want to be an old PE teacher, so I went back to university and did a psychology degree. From the psychology degree, my ambitions were to be a head teacher, and very quickly I was the youngest head teacher in Essex at the time of a special school for emotionally disturbed students. In those days, it was common to go from head teacher to inspector, and I was asked by Essex County to become an inspector, and I became a senior inspector for special needs. That's when Ofsted came in, and I had to train as an Ofsted inspector as part of my role with Essex. And I've been an Ofsted inspector for over 35 years. I've inspected schools all over the world, over 100. After being an inspector for a long time, I decided I should chance my arm at being a principal again to see if I could do what I've been advising people to do through Ofsted most of my life. From UAE, it took me back to Oxford in England, where I was principal of a large school in Oxford, King's. And from King's, I went to Thailand, and I was principal of a large school in Phuket. And then my wife and I opened a small school in Phuket where I semi-retired. And then I got the opportunity on a phone call about Limehouse School here. And I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I always wanted her to be educated in the UK. And so that's what brought me here. So that was a potted history very quickly.
A very long and distinguished career. What was your sport? What were you doing in athletics?
I was growing up in Wales. Rugby was my main ball sport, but I was also in athletics, 100 metres, 200 metres, long jump, triple jump. Basically a track athlete.
I was going to ask you, is it common for PE teachers to become heads of school? I'm not sure that it is, and I think maybe then the difference with in your case is that you went back to uni
You'd
to
be
study
surprised.
psychology.
Many
Yeah, okay.
principals I've met during my inspections and my work now have been previously sports teachers. I think it could be something to do with challenge, ego, wanting to be in charge, wanting to be listened to. I don't know. That's my kind of thoughts, really.
So how do you feel like I often think that, and I'm not a teacher, but I speak with a lot of teachers, a lot of heads, that understanding how children learn and supporting them to learn, there is so much psychology involved in that. I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, that's exactly why I went back. I was very fortunate in my first job as a sports teacher. My head of PE wore a raincoat and a whistle. He was anti-competition, very grumpy, and it was a school dying for particularly the teenage boys to do something active. The behaviour in the school was atrocious, and it was mainly because there was nothing to do. So it was during those 2 years I decided I did not want to be an old PE teacher, and I was more interested in what made teenagers particularly tick. So that's why I went back. I went back to Exeter University. I did behavioural psychology, which is trying to get into the psyche of people, really, to see what makes them tick, and to look at preventative measures rather than what a lot of teachers get bogged down in is just being having to deal with operationally poor behaviour at the end of that behaviour, rather than getting in and looking at the triggers for behaviour and that kind of thing. So that's why I went back to university.
Interesting. So, Michael, what makes teenagers tick?
Wow. Well, I have a teenage daughter now, and as she keeps reminding me, it's the 21st century, Dad. Things have changed. Things have changed, not for the better, and I am old school in terms of electronics, and I do get upset when I see more students playing with their phone than wanting to go outside. I mean, there's many cliches around, particularly on LinkedIn, where you see posters saying, in my day, my mother told me to go outside and not come back until it was dark. Now, to try and get children out of the house is so difficult because they just want to play games or even talk to their friends on their phone rather than arranging to meet up. So that question you just asked me is the fundamental question of this decade, I think. What makes teenagers tick? And I think I'm old school, as I've mentioned, and I don't think the whole Facebook and social media has helped schools and education at all.
Let's take a quick break to talk about something that can make all the difference for your child's educational journey. I'm thrilled to share that this episode is sponsored by Top Schools, your trusted partner in navigating the complex world of school applications. If you're aiming for a top independent school in the UK, Top Schools offers personalised consulting to ensure your child finds the very best fit with a guaranteed outcome. From identifying those best fit schools to crafting standout applications to invigilating the entrance exams, the expert team is with you every step of the way. Ready to take control of your child's future? Visit topschoolsadmissions.com or click the link in the show notes to learn more and book a consultation today. Use the code DESTINATION for 20% off. That code is DESTINATION for 20% off personalised support for entry into a top independent boarding school in the UK. Now, back to our conversation.
No, I think this is a fascinating topic that so many parents will want to know or want some tips because I've got two teenagers and like I often say to parents, our babies didn't come with an instruction manual. And also we grew up, it was very different. So I wonder if it would be really interesting to unpack that a little bit with you if you've got some advice. I tend to agree with you that the anxious generation is very much due in part to the use of screens.
Well, I've been talking to my director of studies over the early part of this holiday, and we've decided to make years 7 and 8 non-electronic. We're going back to books, we're going back to diaries, handwriting, and reading, and we're going to have a big emphasis on reading. We're upgrading the library, and we're pushing that. Year 9, getting close to examinations, electronics come in. They have to do a lot of work on their laptop and preparing in prep and everything. But we're going back a little bit and we're concentrating on that. Students don't have their phones in the classroom. They hand them in at the beginning of the day. A lot of schools do this, and they pick them up at the end of the day, unless a particular teacher has projects during their lessons where the phone may come in, and that's when they come out.
So cognitively, I mean, I want to understand what's the difference in a child reading a book, with pages and ink printed on them, as opposed to reading on a Kindle or an iPad. And again, cognitively, what's the difference for a child writing?
Probably nothing other than screen time. And I think when you look at the amount of hours in a day that a teenager now could spend on screen, I mean, it's the holiday time. It's difficult getting my 13-year-old daughter off her screen during the day. She's talking to her friends, or she's playing a game, or even when she's crocheting, she's online looking at a plan for crocheting. So I think it's screen time. I mean, I had my daughter to read the Hobbit in a hard book because I've got that book, and to see her sitting quietly, turning the pages, um, perhaps it's just old school. I think we can't ignore it, and AI is coming in now in such a huge way. We can't ignore that either, and we've got to get together and plan somehow how all of these areas can be productive for students and not just a negative aspect of their learning.
I mean, I am seeing, I don't know if you're also seeing that there's been a little bit of a reversal of the tide. I feel that the lots and lots of schools are restricting use of devices in school. I think that's fairly recent, or maybe that's on the back of
I'm very I'm very keen on having a week with no phones because, once again, LinkedIn is very good. There's been some projects on from other schools where they've taken the mobiles away for a whole week, and they've noticed some radical changes in pupils' behaviour and communication with each other. I'm really tempted to talk to the staff and try that.
why do children aged what year 7, what's that? That's like what 11, 10, 11. Why do they need phones?
I don't know why they need it now, other than the contact with parents. My daughter went off on a picnic with her friends the other day. We let her take her mobile with her because we wanted to be in contact, and it's usually by WhatsApp texting. Are you okay? Having fun? And it keeps that conversation kind of going.
Mm. But even WhatsApp, I do believe that I'm right in saying that there's a 13 years, there's a limit. You're supposed to be 13 to download and use WhatsApp.
Her mother has very high expectations, and she's monitored a lot of what our daughter has initially done when she first got a phone. And she knows we're monitoring. But as we found out the other day, there are ways to get around the monitoring as well. So we're not naive about that either.
And in the classroom then, as an educator, how are you changing the use of devices and laptops? You did mention that you're just sort of restricting it a little bit.
The issue that we have at Limehouse School is because we're an international school, we have many students whose English is at a lower level and they're requiring a lot of EAL support, etc. So sometimes in the examination classes, the senior students are allowed to look at if there's a technical word that they don't understand in science, they will look it up. So it's used more as a research option in the classroom. Sometimes that can be taken, they take advantage of that, and we have to say, no, this is what this device is for in this classroom. It's not for very quickly getting on WhatsApp, for instance, when the teacher's not looking. We have to be careful of that. But I'm a great believer we can't ignore it because it will always be there. So we have to strive to show them that the only use in a school day is for educational purposes.
Mm. So if you've taken away and restricted the use of devices, and as you said, you're asking children to write more, and what changes have you seen? Have you seen some positive changes?
Hope it takes them away from just the electronic daily, the daily strive for electronics and gets them onto real things. It might be old school, but I've got some very young staff here as well, and they like the idea because we've also noticed a dreadful decline in handwriting. And it's because they're not having to handwrite. They tap it out on a screen. So I did an interview the other day for, it was a business studies interview, and students had to apply for a job, and I was the employer. And they had to write a resume, and they had to send in a CV to me. I was amazed at how I could hardly read the writing because I asked for it to be in writing, not typed out. And that made me think.
I just spoke to a parent this morning, and I was looking at her daughter's written assessment, which I asked for to be written as well. And I commented that her daughter is entering year 11, wasn't using cursive. And she said, "Oh, I don't know. Did they ever learn it? Do they even still teach it? What's the benefit of cursive?" And it got me thinking, and I'm sort of on the same page as you. I think my kids did cursive in year 3, and they got what was called like a pen license. But then we still make children sit exams with pen and paper, but that's really the only reason that they do need to be able to write. Because before the exams and after the exams, they don't need to
There's
write, do they?
some examinations request coursework in handwriting as well. So there's a lot of some examination coursework is quite substantive, and teachers often ask because it's another way of revising. If you remember, if you write something down, you're more likely to remember it.
I agree. And that's why I was asking you earlier, like cognitively, what's the difference between writing something with a pen and paper as opposed to typing it? I feel that there's a cognitive benefit that it's um we used to I don't you we used to have I was telling my children the other day, we used to have index cards where we used to distill our long form notes into shorter and get shorter and shorter and shorter until we had keywords that we would try to
We still
revise
do it.
quickly.
We still do we have I haven't mentioned it yet, but we have a partnership with 3 Chinese schools, and we do interactive competitions, etc., on Zoom, and we did presentations about our school. They did presentations to us, and my head girl is from Hong Kong, and she's an A-star student. She's an amazing girl, and to see her talk now, it's getting on to one of my other areas here about public speaking. To see her talk, she used to use key cards. She doesn't anymore. She looks at them before, and she can talk beautifully. Um, but yes, public speaking is another issue that I have because when I see some assemblies sometimes, and some people are just mumbling into a piece of paper and they're reading off a PowerPoint or what have you, it's not going to do them any good when they get a university interview. They need to know all the skills of public speaking and eye-to-eye contact, etc. And I think that's often been lost. I think it's coming back now, and we're certainly making it an emphasis in this school.
I didn't learn public speaking in school. I'm relatively sure, but you did.
Did I? No, I don't think I did, actually. I think I did A-level English literature, and I think it came out when we were doing plays, and you had to speak and throw your voice, etc. But it wasn't called public speaking, it was just called communication, I guess. And we do drama here as well, and that is emphasized, when we do plays, etc.
Yeah, tell me more about the Chinese schools, because I was looking, you also had Chinese students over for summer programs. Is that right?
Yeah, we had 5 different Chinese schools come over for the summer camp. We had 2 groups. The first group was nearly 40, the second group was nearly 80, and they came in as part of an immersion program where they mixed with our own day students, and in the afternoon we did trips and various activities with them. They were an absolute delight, and I'm looking forward to at least 5 or 6 of them wanting to come back and study with us full time because they were just amazed. Most of them come from schools from inner cities, and it's the first time they'd seen rolling hills and fields and cows and rabbits, and they were just astonished. They would get up early even before breakfast to walk around our grounds because they loved it so much. The first group, unfortunately, had a lot of rain, but the second group were very lucky. They did trips to Edinburgh, they did trips to the Lake District, and they had a really good time, and it was very enjoyable for us as well. In September, we've got 2 Spanish groups coming. This has been historical for the school that in September 2 different groups of Spanish students come over. Once again, they're immersed with our own students across the curriculum, and in the afternoon, excuse me, they get involved in other activities, etc. It helps our students who are learning Spanish here greatly. But I should get in at the moment as well. I've made 2 more contacts this last year, one in Azerbaijan and one in Turkey, and I'm hosting 2 Turkish school owners this Friday, actually. They are owners of 15 different schools in Azmir, where I visited a couple of weeks back. And I'll be going over to Azmir in October to talk to principals of 15 other schools who might well want to be involved in sending their students over, particularly for sixth form.
You described the school earlier as an international school, so you see it as an international school. Tell me more about the
It
makeup
wasn't,
of the
when I
community.
came here, it wasn't spoken of as an international school. It was spoken of as a day and boarding school. Well, our day students only comprise about a third of our total number, and the number of boarders come from, at the moment, I think about 12, 13 different countries. We have Russians, Ukrainians, Moroccans, Turkish, some Europeans, not many Europeans, a lot of Chinese, which has been traditional in this school. Although having said that, the number of Chinese students has been declining. And I think that's not just our school, it's other schools that found that as well. And of course, the 20% VAT on school fees hasn't helped either. But I think we are international. We're not purely international in terms of staffing. I have one Polish member of staff, I have a Spanish member of staff. In all the international schools I've been principal of before, we've had far greater international staff as well. But I think the other side of our unique selling point, other than being in rural North England, is the difficulty in recruiting people who don't live locally, because we haven't got an international package at the moment for employing international staff, which is on our agenda for doing something about that. And it's mainly because our numbers are lower at the moment, which means resources are lower, which means we can't put money in terms of marketing for international staff. But it's on our agenda.
What sort of positions would you like to recruit from outside the UK?
It could be anything, those people who are actually qualified in the subjects, because locally, unless you live within travel distance, it's very difficult to recruit somebody in this area because we are kind of remote. So they usually have to already be living somewhere in Carlisle, maybe, that they can travel in. If we develop an international package, for instance, we have a gatehouse at the end of our long drive. It's been empty for 100 years. With a little bit of investment, it could be a 4-bedroomed place as an initial stopover for an international student or staff before they get on their feet and they can find somewhere local.
So are you saying that it's difficult to recruit domestically? So you're saying that it's difficult to attract qualified staff from the
We
cities
need
like
we
Manchester or
need to be able to
Newcastle
look more widely,
widely?
because the staff locally, it is the other side of this USP. We are very rural, and unless you're within travel distance, our salaries aren't high. They tend not to be so high in independent schools as a mainstream school. I lost one teacher last term. His domestic circumstances changed and he needed to get more money, and he had to go to a local school because the local school can offer more salary. What I say, if they come and teach here, is it isn't the salary, it's the conditions of service. They have small classes, they have enthusiastic students, they have great support from the rest of the staff, they have an amazing environment, and that has to count against the salary.
Yeah, it's a whole experience. But I see what you're saying. Interesting. I want to also ask you about, you've got a lot of experience with state schools, because if I'm not wrong, Ofsted can, but doesn't generally inspect independent schools. Is
No,
that correct?
there is a separate inspectorate for independent schools. I did the training
ISI.
for that, but it coincided with me then going internationally, so I didn't actually inspect independent schools. But yes, state schools I've inspected.
So, what, in your opinion, and also just want to clarify for anyone who's not clear, because Ripon Grammar is a school that you went to, which is still
Yes.
very much in existence and very popular, is a state school, but is also a grammar school. Because grammar schools, I mean, I can't even remember. I did the 11 plus and failed it, and so I did not go to a grammar school. Can you explain it all for people who don't know?
Well, I took my 11 plus in South Wales, and I failed it, and I went to Abersachen Grammar Technical School. I did very well in Abersachen Grammar Technical School. So when my parents moved to Yorkshire, my father put an application in for Ripon, and I can remember now having the interview with the headmaster, who was wearing his cloak and gown and everything else, and he didn't invite me to sit down in his office. I had to stand in front of him, and he was questioning me about why I think I was good enough to join Ripon Grammar. And he had my last report in front of him, my last school report. I don't know whether it was, oh, and also I was 14, and student boys at that Ripon Grammar at 14 wore shorts. And I can remember saying to my father, I am not wearing shorts. I haven't worn shorts since I was 10 years old. I'm not going to wear shorts. So during this interview, I obviously managed to convince the head that, I mean, I was in the top. My classes in Wales were 30, and I was in 1, 2, or 3 every term. So I was seen as a good student.
In the days when students were ranked, when
Yes.
your report said your
Yes.
position over
Yes.
the number of students in the class,
Yes.
because
The
of
only
course we
thing
don't
he
do
said,
that.
which was quite amusing at the time, he said, I'm looking at your report in Latin, Smith, and you had 40%. And he looked up at me, and he looked at my glasses like that, and he said, I think you'll need to drop Latin. And I felt so good that he was saying I had to drop Latin because I did not like Latin. Anyway, look, cut a long story short, I was accepted, and at the end of the interview, he said to me, and I was as tall as I am now, just under 6 foot. He said, I understand boys of your age are getting taller, and we've been meaning to review the policy about boys wearing shorts at 14. So when I arrived the next term, I was known as this tall Welsh boy that convinced the head teacher that boys could wear long trousers. So I was an instant hero.
So you didn't need to sit for a test
No.
or to
No, I
pass
didn't,
to
which was
get
very
into
unusual.
Uh,
Because most
Interesting.
schools now have an entrance test. We have one. It's generalized English and maths and a little bit of science. Yeah, you're quite right. That was
But in
back
the
in
state
1968.
sector, in the state sector, there are very, very few grammar schools left, aren't there? I think you can count them on 2 hands.
I have to say, when I was at Ripon Grammar, on the other side of the road was a comprehensive school, or a secondary school as they were called. When it came to sixth form, the grammar school offered scholarships to the top students across the road in the secondary school. And one of my best friends became one of those students that came across. And I would have to say that of all my friendships in the sixth form, he was the hardest working student. I had a photographic memory in those days, and I could sit an examination and pass it, but I was lazy during the term time, whereas this boy, because of the CSEs with the exams that he had to take, it was coursework, and he had to show regular work that was coming in. And that's made my eyes open a little bit. And now, of course, we try to look at what cohort we've got in the school. Are they good at sitting examinations, or are they good at ongoing coursework? And schools now can tailor examinations to particular cohorts. We have a very traditional school here. The boarders on a Saturday morning do a test. They either do a mock exam if they're of that age, or they do some kind of test, or they do something academic. So it's quite traditional here on a Saturday morning. We have prep every single evening, and that is, we're trying to make sure that there's more writing involved in that as well, and reading.
It's interesting. I want to come back to, you raise a really interesting point about the style of a learner. Like, are exams the right? Let's park that for a moment, because I actually want to come back and ask you about state schools and independent schools, because you're currently leading an independent school. What are some of your observations about the key differences?
Well, the state schools, the big difference at the moment, I think, is numbers, because in a state school, you're likely to be in a class of 20 plus. In an independent school, rarely would there be more than, I would say, 16. In a state school, there's probably more instances of low-level disruption in classes. There's probably slightly more stress on teachers in terms of, if you've got a class of 30 and you're an English teacher and you've got several classes of 30, the marking of homework alone can be stressful. And a lot of the time, the marking gets postponed. Students get upset that the work that they've done hasn't been looked at or marked. In an independent school, that just doesn't happen because parents are actually paying for education, and teachers have to understand that they are producing something which the parents have got to be confident in, and to have unmarked homework would be a absolute disaster. Also, in a state school, I think community-wise, it can be very successful. I mean, it's according what policies the school have got and how consistently they're adhered to. In the schools that, in my day, were the top schools in Adik, I'm going back to UAE, Ofsted, I would say that it's the school where the practice matches the policy. And that used to be one of my many mantras when I was inspecting. I would look generally to see if the policy was put into practice and not just a nice glossy document that the school had produced. It had to be in practice. And that's something that we try to instill in Limehouse here. If we say something, we hope that people can actually say, yes, we actually do it, because there's no point in saying it otherwise. So I think independent schools, by their very word, are able, I think, to look at the personal development of students more so than a mainstream school, than a state school. State schools have got PHAC lessons, of course they have, and they look at personal, social and civic education. But it's easier for an independent school with smaller numbers to actually really put that into practice.
Mm. And like you say, by their definition of being independent, if you as the head of the school are looking around and saying, I think the children are spending too much time on devices, we can just change that, and then you can put that into
Yeah.
practice.
It all comes down whether it's state or independent in the communication with parents. As long as you can convince parents that it's a good idea for their child, why the school is doing something, and you have the backing of parents, a lot of it comes down to how successful your communication with parents is. Although, having said that, and I don't know if you would agree with this, that the whole parent-school communication has also changed, because in my day, of course, my parents would support the school 100%, and they would not listen to me if I had a grouch. Now it's tending to go the other way. Parents would believe 100% their child without looking thoroughly at the evidence the school is providing. So that's caused another challenge with parents' communication.
Yeah, 100%. And it makes me think of the policy in the UK with the state schools, whereby parents will be, I'm not sure of the penalty. There's some sort of penalty for taking children out of school during term time.
When I worked for Croydon for a year. I was deputy director for the first time when social services came into education and they joined together. So I had a team of social workers. Now, what do we call them? I used to check on attendance officers, basically. And Croydon brought in the fining system. If a child was off school for long periods of time, under 80%, the parents would get a letter with a fine. And of course, it was very, very controversial, because some parents agreed to go to court and to say, it's not my fault. I can't control my 15-year-old child. I think he goes to school in the morning. If he doesn't turn up, I didn't know about it until you told me. We had quite a few court cases in Croydon about that, really. And of course, the let out for some parents, suddenly they decided to teach their child at home. And that got them off the fine, because that is a legal option for parents as well. But then comes in the state inspector, and I did this as well when I was in Southend. You get inspecting those parents and families who decide to teach their child at home, and they have to show a certain level of competence to be able to carry that on.
It is interesting, and I think that the level of sometimes they call it school refusal, but since
Yes.
COVID, there's been a lot of homeschooling. Has been a big trend towards homeschooling.
It's a huge industry now, actually, and we're considering having an online school within our school as well. We've also offered all the homeschoolers in this part of Cumbria, if they want to come and sit their examinations with us, we've got open doors, and we do off-term time courses in revision, etc. as well. But there's quite a number, as you say, since COVID particularly, some parents have looked at that option. And of course, the blended learning comes in. We're all getting involved in some students we've got online. We've got a couple of students in Dubai that have some of our lessons here. Um, yeah, so it's the blended learning and the online learning is a big thing at the moment.
Well, during COVID, when we were all forced to, I was saying to someone, the children were forced to go online and teachers were compelled to deliver online. But it was interesting as parents as well, because for some of us, for the first time, we actually got to look over our children's shoulders and see
Yes,
what what
yes,
what they were doing or not
yes,
doing, and it
yes.
was interesting. But now they're all so comfortable with it that becomes an option going forward, right? I want to
Uh,
also ask you about your background you mentioned something, and I know that it was different times, and I guess it was during like the 70s or the 80s, where you said you worked with schools for the emotionally disturbed, which sounds so, um, well, it sounds so archaic, doesn't it?
When I came out of university with a psychology degree, my first job was in Cambridge, and it was one of my favourite jobs I've ever had. It was 50% opening up a primary unit for disturbed children in a primary school, and it was 50% working with the educational psychology service, going out and visiting schools, observing lessons, and supporting and giving advice to teachers who were dealing with students with disruptive behaviour.
And so, what were like, calling them emotionally disturbed? I mean, I guess that would
They
have
were called
changed quite
EBD in
quickly.
those days, emotionally
Emotional,
behaviourally disturbed. They were called EBD. Now it's ADHD, and
is it? Do you
my
think it's the same thing though? Is it
um,
a lot of the same behaviours?
yes and no. ADHD, I talk to parents. I mean, when I interview parents and students now, I think 2 out of 3 seem to come with ADHD. Um, I think we're all on a continuum of ADHD, all of us. And according to circumstances, we go up and down according to the stress levels. I mean, the definition of ADHD is quite wide and it affects people completely differently. The school that I went to, though, after, okay, Cambridge was that they wanted me to set up something because this particular school in Cambridge was taking in a lot of Vietnamese boat children as asylum seekers at that time. And also, interestingly, it was an international school because of the university. So a lot of university lecturers, students went there. So that was my first experience, if you like, of a class of students who might come from 6 or 7 different nationalities. The Vietnamese asylum seeker boys, mainly boys, had very little English at all. And because of that, they were disruptive. Now, that's when you have to clarify, is it a learning difficulty or is it an innate behavioral difficulty? And working with the ed psychs for 50% of my time opened my eyes a great deal in terms of let's not label students at all until we know if it's a learning difficulty that's frustrating them in the classroom, and then they're getting labeled as a behavioral problem. Um, and I think that still happens today.
And is getting a label today, is that something that you support?
Only if it brings in additional resources from the county, which helps me actually employ an additional person to help them in the classroom. I call them, and I even quoted this to a parent the other day, I call them idiosyncratic foibles. We've all got idiosyncratic foibles. We're increasingly taking students who are on the autistic spectrum, for instance. And it seems to me, from my position at the moment, that there are more and more um, students who have been labelled on the autistic spectrum, where I call them idiosyncratic foibles. They've got a characteristic, or they're not part of a crowd, or they've got something which pulls them away from the general population. I don't see the point of saying that they're ASD at all, unless it interferes with their learning or it interferes with the learning of other students. And then you've got to look at different strategies. We have got 2 students who are classed as ASD in our primary part of the school, and they are a delight. They've got characters. They quite typically, one's very brilliant at maths, one's very brilliant at art. But not all ASD labelled students are brilliant at anything. They just have characteristics which make them look odd. I mean, in the early days when I went to school, there wasn't ASD, but we'd call them odd. They're a bit peculiar. They're a bit funny. They're not, you know.
Well, we also had some unkind labels for them, right? Under the umbrella of emotionally disturbed, I suppose. But yeah, times
But
have
also,
changed.
I'm a great believer in nurture rather than nature. So it's according what background these students come from. I receive parents who are incredibly supportive, very intelligent, understand the issues, are very supportive of school. And I've got other students who've been either neglected or they've been paid off or they've been given everything they want. And it's nurture plays a huge point.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I think if there's one piece of advice or two or three that you would impart to parents, probably you do this on a daily basis. So what is the advice that you find yourself dispensing out most frequently?
Oh, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it, really? If I knew the answer to that, I'd have put it in a book and made a fortune by now. One of my favourite posters is of a grandfather holding his granddaughter's hand, and they're walking in the woods, and she looks up at her grandfather and says, "Grandfather, what do you think I should do when I grow up? What direction do you think I should go in?" And he looks down at her and he says, "To be a good person, because the world really needs good people and there's not much competition." Limehouse School, where I am, has previously been known, and I'm very pleased, to produce not just academic students who go to Oxford and Cambridge, but they've got integrity, compassion, and they are basically supportive, good people. And I think, from a parent's point of view, if they can support that ideal and not kind of want their child to be perfect, want their child to get the best results, yes, work hard, but also allow them to be a good person. And that might sound old school as well, but we revere and reward students in this school for random acts of kindness, for instance. I love seeing a random act of kindness. And I have little medals in my pocket, which sometimes I give out when I see somebody doing something when they're not looking. So I think parents should support their students, their children, being good people, understanding, being compassionate, supportive, understanding the difference. This world at the moment is a mess. I mean, it depresses me sometimes when I look worldwide. But the advice for me is, it is very trite and traditional. It's cliches everywhere. Listen to your children more. And I am guilty about this as well. Sometimes I'm working and I say, "Not now, I'll talk to you later." Listen to your children more because you want open communication with them. You don't want them hiding things. Um, so it's good parenting to listen. It's good for teachers to listen as well. And I say that. I mean, in my inspection days, I mean, the ratio of teachers talking and listening was crucial for me. And some teachers talk far too much and don't allow their students to talk at all. So listen. I would also say support your school. Really understand what your school is trying to do with your child, and be as helpful as you can in terms of supporting what the school is trying to do.
The thing is, it sounds so obvious and what I would call as common sense. But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Parents, especially first-time parents, or well, even not you have your second or your third child, and they're just completely different creatures anyhow. But it's just we no one tells us what to do as parents.
One of the other thing I would say is teach responsibility for actions, because one of our mantras at school is the 3 Rs. We have respect, responsibility, and rights. And without respect and without responsibility, you can't expect your rights. A lot of students come back and say, "It's my right to do this, it's my right to do that." And I will say, well, when you demonstrate responsibility and respect for your colleagues, your teachers, etc., your rights don't come into it. You don't automatically have a right unless the balance is with respect and responsibility. I think parents teaching their children to be responsible for their own actions and not to blame other people for things, not to scapegoat if they get a poor mark, to be responsible.
So what do you think has changed from, say, your generation, like your parents? You said that they would have respected your teachers and they respected the authority. And I wonder, I think I have I have my own theory as to what might have changed. What's yours?
So what was the difference between when I was growing up?
Yeah, what's the difference between like parents today and say your parents?
I
Yeah, what are
mentioned
the
it earlier on that my parents would blame me if I got a bad report at school. Now parents blame the school if there's a bad report. They're saying the teachers aren't good enough or my child isn't learning. And it's very difficult to articulate that your child is late for lessons, has missed a few lessons, particularly we're a boarding school. I had problems with 3 18-year-old students not getting up in time for breakfast and missing their first lesson. Well, that's not being responsible. That's missing a lesson. And if they don't catch up on what they've missed, that accrues and escalates, so I think it's parents believing their children, not the school, without looking into the details and the background.
Yeah, I just wonder if you have an idea of if you've got any theories as to why they might think that way.
I think that could be quite psychological in terms of, we mentioned earlier on, the time that parents give their children now. I think that has probably changed. Um, I think I'm a reasonably normal normal family in terms of both mother and father are working. The difference is with my situation, I guess, is that my child comes to my school. We try to avoid each other during the day. And that on the travel home, I will ask her how her day was, and she'll ask how my day was. I've asked her not to tittle tattle and tell me things that she wouldn't normally tell anybody because I'm the principal. That's not fair on her, and it's helped her friendships because they know now that she doesn't talk to me about things in school. Um, I think it's making time for your children. I've always said one of my other many mantras is family, health, work, in that order. Family, health, work. If you get it mixed up too much, it will cause issues which you then have to resolve. I think your family should come first. Health is important because that causes stress if there's no health, and then work then, and put that in order. When work gets first, I think then children can possibly fall out of that attention thing because they will want attention, and the attention seeking can then become negative rather than positive.
Mm. So interesting. I mean, I just want to ask you finally, you've raised a daughter who is in her 40s. Is that right?
She is 38, yes.
So almost 40, and you have a 12-year-old. What
Yes.
is the difference in the way that you raise both daughters?
They're hugely different characters. My current daughter is an A-star student. She's Ukrainian, but you wouldn't know it. Her English is perfect. Her mother has extremely high expectations, which she's managed to meet. And it's only this last year at Limehouse School that we have put balance into her life in terms of what I was saying about being a good person, what I was saying about being a compassionate person, somebody with integrity, and that if she tries her hardest, if she doesn't get an A-star, I'm not going to be worried about it. And I've convinced her mother of the same thing, that yes, we have high expectations, but only for her. She likes winding us up now by saying, "Oh, I might not go to university. I might do something else." And she knows that will wind her mother up. But I'm quite
But
happy with that.
she's got
Uh,
another 6 years before she goes to uni, 5, 6 years. Maybe it won't be
of
required by
course,
then.
of course. And that's what I
Maybe
say.
that's a bit soon. But I
Yeah.
think in another 10 or 15 years, it might not be required.
I think that's another area of education we haven't discussed, but it's vocational education, apprenticeships, internships are huge because all the students, because the demographics are changing, we're not just getting students who are going to Oxford and Cambridge, and we have to cater for those students as well. And there's a plethora of opportunities out there now other than university. And that's convincing parents as well, particularly the international parents who think they're sending their children to education in the UK for a UK university career. And it doesn't always have to be that way.
I think just on that note, there was I was listening to a podcast the other day. It's a guy, Geoffrey Hinton, who is known as the father of AI, and he was asked, if you had children and what career would you suggest that they would pursue? And he said plumber, electrician, mechanics. I mean, these are
Something
the
that AI
jobs.
can't do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on that note, Michael, it's been a fascinating chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Lots of good advice, and we'll put all of the details if people want to chat with you directly, come and visit the school. We'll put those details in the show notes. Finally, I have a tradition. What is the one question that I should have asked you, but I have not yet asked you?
A little bit more about Limehouse School, because this is a little bit marketing, I guess. I managed to get in our mantras about the 3 R's and integrity, compassion, and excellence.
Yeah. And I think that one of the reasons that I wanted to speak with you, and I want to speak to lots of different heads in lots of different schools, is that people who are listening this will make up their own minds, and if they like what they hear, they'll get in touch and start a conversation. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
And
You too.
thanks, Michael. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. If today's episode sparked questions, or if you're ready for support with UK boarding school admissions, we're here to help. Reach out to us at www.topschoolsadmissions.com or follow the link in the show notes. Your child's exceptional UK boarding school educational journey starts with a conversation, so let's have a chat.